Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news for Friday, August 30th. Got interrupted at the end of the last episode, so we have a little bit of leftover work to do there. And as far as interrupted goes, I am completely interrupted as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! In that I am just not playing any of it. We are at the end of the month. I am going to end this month at Silver 3 and then fall down to whatever, I guess bronze. The dual trial fusion gate here is a whole nother event I probably won't even really engage with, although it would be fairly easy to just get this one pack since this only requires 3 wins. And then as far as the dual pass goes, there are 17 days left. And my best hope would be to play enough to just get to level 50, and that's about it. Like, I don't think I'm making it to level 100. I do notice that if I was to make it to level 75, at least I'd get yet another pointless add-on. We are 2.5 years now, it feels like. Maybe I'm a little bit off on the date, into Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. And your average mobile game, none of this I think has started. Yeah. Your average mobile game only lasts 3 years, or on average mobile games last only 3 years. And honestly, even though you have Konami behind this, and you have the power of Yu-Gi-Oh! As a real-world number 3 in the top 3 collectible card games being played worldwide, it's just not really doing anything. It just has not done enough to keep your average player playing. And it's kind of ironic because the daily missions did not, and it has not helped at all. Like, this is the thing that should motivate players to come back and play all the time. And when I was playing Hearthstone, having 3 daily missions and having to come back every 3 days and play just worked a lot better than having like single 1-day daily missions, even if there are more. Plus, the amounts of rewards in Hearthstone eventually got fairly good as far as getting entire packs for doing a daily mission, where this is giving you half of a pack's worth of gems, or 40% of a pack's worth of gems actually, which means you have to do about 3 daily missions before you could even open 1 pack, and 1 pack is kind of insignificantly unimportant amongst Yu-Gi-Oh! Because the core problem is that there's just 10,000 plus cards in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Real world card game, and about 8,000 plus, I suspect, nowadays in this game. And only 500 at most of those cards are actually viable to play in. It is crazy. See, you see this master deck pack, which I think includes most of the cards, is up to 8,229 cards now. And even though I probably have about half of them. So what I suspect will probably happen is that Konami, which I think it's Konami that owns this company, will probably just think about making a whole new game and just cycling in yet another Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. At a certain point, if they could get Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush to be anything, I haven't heard anybody say anything about Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush in probably a year, so it may already have been abandoned. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to do something more like Duel Links in a new game that plays like regular Yu-Gi-Oh! But has more of the anime story built into it. These solo modes here are about the last thing that I might actually play But there's just a point where I probably need to draw a line in the sand and just say, look, I'm not going to do these solo modes either. There's no point in doing the solo modes if I'm not playing the main game. But yeah. Yu-Gi-Oh! As a game itself has a problem with it just becoming way too slow. And so maybe they should really embrace more banning of cards like Magic did. As much as people may hate the greediness of Magic the Gathering, the concept of banning cards and printing out new cards that are basically the same as the old cards, your 2/2 bear example there in Magic the Gathering, that has at least kept Magic the Gathering going for a very long time. And certainly it would kind of help new players. But yeah, I could also just see they could just give a ton of cards to everybody. They could you almost need a system, and I'm going to stop talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Pretty quickly here. But you almost need a system where digitally a card game gives all the new cards to all the players and lets them play with them for an entire season, whether that's half a year, a quarter of a year, a full year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And then that would create a very balanced system, and then have just a higher price to own those cards after that season. That you would have to spend a significant amount of gems to keep that card permanently and be able to play with that card permanently. And that's where your whales potentially would come in, is that they would have cards that were really powerful that for most players would have been removed from their decks. Inherently, if you did have that kind of backward system, it's almost an anti-collectible card game at that point. It also keeps the player bases that are the free-to-players more simplistic. They don't have to worry so much about what cards to get if they're going to stay free-to-play players. And it constantly makes people rebuild their decks and changes the meta in a slightly different way. Yeah. That would be an interesting idea. I'm not sure it could ever actually be implemented, however. So yeah, suffice it to say, my frustrations with Yu-Gi-Oh! Continue even though I'm not really playing it. And then my frustrations in general continue, even though I'm not accomplishing too much. I did a little bit more working on the theming of the news pages and the follow list cleanup. So that is still a thing. And yeah, I imagine the SteamDB chart here is not going to change too much. I did see someone play Binding of Isaac Rebirth as far as one of the speed games done quick. And yeah, they had a mod on it, and it's been a long time since I've watched anybody play Binding of Isaac. Decent amount of stuff in the next DLC that I want to cover, which is pretty old at this point. But that is also kind of the first time I've started watching speedruns again from games done quick. They've been fairly uninteresting, fairly repetitive. I also watched on Amazon Prime a animated cartoon based on Hello Neighbor, which kind of just ends on a cliffhanger. I'm not sure if the Hello Neighbor game series ever really wraps up its mystery, or if the mystery in the animated show cartoon, which it's weird it's being targeted to kids, is I'm not sure if the story is the same as it is in the cartoon, in the actual game. The cartoon story is the same as the game's story. I want to also shout out a YouTube video I just finished watching talking about how 1 year later Starfield, the title Starfield is still embarrassing 1 year later from Legacy Killa HD. I suggest checking that out. Certainly it does look like to me Starfield is not relevant enough or reviewed well enough, being mixed reviewed, that there would be any reason to play it. But it certainly could be a historical point to point to as far as a potential downfall for Bethesda. Maybe Bethesda really should just fall apart. Like, inherently, gamers often, and mainstream video game journalists in particular, often want to support the game developers. Usually it's the Todd Howards, the directors, the faces we see that people want to support, when in reality we kind of don't know if the same programmers at Bethesda are being treated well or being given an opportunity to succeed, or even the same people as the people who made Skyrim. It's very believable that there might be only a small percentage of people who worked on Skyrim, the original Skyrim version, that are still working at Bethesda other than Todd Howard. But yeah, it might be better for gaming in general if Microsoft just shut down ZeniMax, shut down Bethesda, took those IPs and handed them to some other team, licensed them to some other team to make the games. In particular, I think you get away from the creation engine in the case of Starfield and all Bethesda games, Fallout and yeah, I guess it would be Fallout, Starfield, and whatever the next Elder Scrolls game is going to be. If you move that to an Unreal Engine, that might work a lot better. Meanwhile, as far as actual games, as we go down this list, I guess Deadlock is still the biggest news at the moment, but it definitely doesn't feel like the news is particularly that big at all as far as new games. And yeah, I would say my thought is that the biggest enthusiasm is something like Supermarket Together here over anything else. And although, in fairness, there is a lot of enthusiasm that is making bots continue to make games like Banana still be at the high levels that it is at. I came in here and changed the chart a little bit. I think there's still room for improvement, but this is getting closer to the themes. Changing each individual color is going to be something that I may have to wait until quite a while until I started to change it. I could probably change the first 5 columns, but then once a new column is added, it's just going to be yet another shade of different colors. And the tilt here is something I would like, but by having a tilt here, it adds this white space on the edge, and it tends to not really account for the bottom margin. And this is the top 50 games that have been ranked in the top 100 now, with Black Myth Wukong being in the #1 spot for each day that's been sampled, thus getting 100 points effectively each day. That being followed by Counter-Strike 2, Dota. We may very well find that it's easier to blacklist the top 6 games, which never are likely to change, and focus more on the trending here. And it does still, even showing the top 50, point out that I probably would need the top 25 to get the text to be really readable in this case. Yeah, I could make the text go straight down this way, and I may have to just do that, but it's still not big enough. But I did get the blue background to be more in line with Steam. Of course, these color palettes not really in line with Steam. We have at this point also pretty well normalized the first sample to the point where you're not having Black Myth Wukong having 100 points on the first day push it into the first spot. And yeah, we see our biggest drop here between The Sims 4 and Crab Game. In a lot of ways, it might be more interesting to have a list of games that popped up on the top 100 but then kind of disappeared, at least in an end of year recap, to say, hey, here's all the games that made it to the top 100 list, even though the significant number of them would be very much only on the number 100 list for a week or two. But yeah, part of my concern here is certainly if you're on a computer and the text was going straight down, you can't easily rotate a computer monitor to read that any easier, and if you're on a cell phone looking at it, it's still going to be too small. So the chart still needs work. Yeah, there is a potential thought here of having a chart that isn't really a chart and just having text in a list. It wouldn't be as pretty, and it would be harder to understand, certainly. And charts are, when properly designed, made to make things easier to understand, particularly trends easier to understand. Noticeably, this game, Tapple, has been rated particularly poorly on some of the weeks, and yet is strong overall. For this game, Euro Truck Simulator wasn't even on the list this week, so it could easily fall down further and further. Yeah. Strong launches potentially for games like Euro Truck Simulator may push games up higher on the chart before they eventually fall down, which is kind of exactly what I'm trying to depict here, if I'm successfully depicting anything. Moving on to Steam, my save RAM by suspending pages extension is once again not working because these things are falling asleep. The pages are falling asleep. Lego Harry Potter, Hogwarts Legacy, some kind of bundle or sale. And do we have anything else to really show? There is a Slick Deals right now. It's somewhat speculative, but apparently you can buy up to 3 gift cards for 10% off on GameStop digital gift cards. So you could buy 3 100, I think is probably the highest denomination of Steam cards you could get from GameStop and get 10% off of that. It's 15% off if you have GameStop Pro Max. Maybe that's the name of it. Maybe it's just GameStop Pro, which increasingly would be less valuable now that Game Informer has been completely shut down. If you really thought Game Informer had any value at all, you were getting something at least other than just extra discounts. So yeah, theoretically you could get 15% off of $300 towards the purchase of a Steam Deck. If you're getting a refurbed $350 one, that's almost enough money there. There is, and this is where I'll add my own personal speculation, it's very rare that buying gift cards via a cashback credit card gives you extra cash back on that. There are definitely some cashback credit cards that will give you 5 or 6% back, so you might get another percentage there. But yeah, it's very rare that buying gift cards counts towards that. But if you perhaps bought the gift cards in the same purchase as buying something else that was from gift card from GameStop, I might change how it gets categorized. But I bet they probably have systems to avoid that too. But yeah, by all means, try that. That's still not going to get you too much off. It may be $50 off of a Steam Deck, and it's not enough money, really. If there wasn't a limit of 3, and you could buy $500 or $600 worth of Steam gift cards from GameStop, 10% off, that would be a lot better. And certainly you can skip the Steam Deck thought completely and just buy games on Steam, which 10% off of the gift cards to then put money into your Steam account to then buy games that often are 90, 75% or to 90% off during Steam summer sales would work, certainly. It also allows for you to not have to go to the maximum if you don't want to of buying 3 $100 gift cards. This may also be limited to the United States too. I don't know how many GameStops are outside of the United States. And yeah, I'm still not really seeing Pharmacy Simulator. Is that different enough? No, I think that's just even more annoying than being a supermarket simulator game, because Pharmacy Simulator means there's always going to have to be somebody behind the counter checking you out. Just like in the real world, pharmacies take more time and are more annoying than just going to a grocery store and picking things up off the shelf. But yeah, we're not getting any real announcements for the next big sale. I imagine they're waiting a little bit longer, and then we will have a fall sale in maybe late September, maybe a Halloween sale, probably not in October, and then it's possible they may just call the Black Friday fall sale. That may not be anywhere close to Black Friday, the fall sale for Steam. And it's kind of hard to get hyped about sales on Steam in particular when A, I'm not really having time to play games increasingly, and B, there aren't any real major new games to buy. Yeah. Steam Deck put out an update for the Steam Beta channel, but we still really haven't seen any major change to the Steam family sharing setup in any way. So seems like that's potentially something that they've just kind of de-emphasized. I heard some people were upset. I don't know why they were upset with Valve, because Dreadlock's Steam page apparently didn't have the required 6 screenshots that Steam requires for other people to put up Steam pages. But inherently, I don't think Valve has to follow the same agreement that everybody else has offered. And that seems just kind of ridiculous. and to complain about anyways. Obviously, there will be 6 screenshots on Deadlock. Or is it Deadlock? Yeah, that's the name of it. Fairly quickly before it actually launches. And you can continuously just scroll down here. I heard one of these Fate Stay remasters was very poorly made, in that like different characters' avatars were popping up in the wrong place. So it would be one person speaking and the avatar of another character would show up and load in the English translation. Seemed to be pretty rough too, but I'm not seeing that in Fate Stay Night Remastered, which is rated very positively. Yeah, as we continue to scroll down here, it's really just the same old, same old. It is very much just the I Want a New Drug was a song a long time ago. It's that thought as far as gaming. We've seen the old, we want something new, and we're moving closer towards the Black Friday Christmas season, and there's just not a lot new likely to even show up. It's a depressed year as far as game output. So yeah, let's go through the Video Games Chronicle news. A new Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom trailer shows off Zelda's combat abilities, which is interesting because I wasn't thinking she would have any combat abilities at all. I did work on these, and in the examples I worked on, everything was formatted perfectly, and now I see very much this is not working perfectly. One of the things that's the problem here is you you adjust one thing, and that CSS character class may affect multiple things in a double manner. So if I tell one thing to move 5% to the right, that thing may also get moved to the 5% to the right twice. So it's now 10% to the right, and I've run into that issue before. So looking at this trailer, it does seem like she can conjure a few things that will fight mostly on her behalf, more than she's going to just have a weapon and use it herself, I was about to say, but seems like that's exactly the thing that's going to happen. So yeah, she does have this kind of like shielded sword fighting form, which then makes her effectively Link. The only difference, I would assume, is that she possibly can only do that for a amount of time until her mana runs out. So they're keeping her magical in that sense. Now, of the Zeldas we've seen in other Zelda games, she usually is not just picking up a Master Sword equivalent and swinging a sword. She's usually jumping around, casting magic, doing maybe magic arrows and missiles, magic missiles, things like that. That's more what I would have expected from her, even in this game, if it was going to have any direct combat anyways, which I kind of thought it wouldn't. Having her in a sword fighting mode just feels like they are still really hedging their bets here, and that there will possibly just be an option to play as Link very early in the game and palette swap out the character. They've already backed off and said that you will be able to play as Link in some part of the game. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a significant percentage of the game you can play as Link. Because, yeah, Nintendo just not thinking that kids want to play as a girl, and they're still very much targeting a boy audience. Whether they're right or not, I mean, you're talking Japanese men who are in their 60s, 70s, if not 80s, making this decisions in Nintendo. So that level of chauvinism is expected. It shouldn't be expected, but it is likely. Okay, so see, I'm still getting these pop-ups. Maybe the suspending of the tabs is causing these suggestions to pop up. Well, that is another page that I'll have to tweak as far as getting everything centered correctly. Also spent way too much time trying to get Twitter to look like the same thing, and Twitter's the way Twitter shows images, some of its images, is by setting the picture as the background of a frame, of an iframe, I think is probably what it's doing, which means there's really just no way to scale it and get it exactly right. There's actually a hidden picture that is not visible, that is floating above the background, but what you're actually seeing is the backgrounds that just stretch to fit the space available. Problem with that is I don't want them to stretch to fit 100% of the way. I want the images like this, and see, this one probably needs a little bit more tweaking too, to stretch at most 80% of the way so that the text and the picture all fit. Yeah, it may not be really worth it to tweak this one because it's only really cutting off a little bit. The actual headline here is: a video game based on the Batman film universe is in development, it's been claimed. Batman suit was added to Arkham Knight last year. I guess the movies, whichever movies they're actually talking about, are probably old enough that that would be the most logical way to go. You've got to bring back Batman after killing him stupidly in the Arkham Asylum series, and you've got to tell some stories, so why not just tell the movie stories in video game form, or at least loosely tell the movie stories in video game form, which the movie stories themselves are just loosely telling some of the best Batman comic stories. And it's not like there's a whole bunch of new comic stories that people would be familiar with from Batman that people would prefer. I think we're still at a point now where Batman is married to Catwoman, and it is much more of a family affair. That almost certainly would not happen in the game series anytime soon, though. I also adjusted, to little avail here, how far I have to go to, well, I thought I had adjusted it to pop up that screen. I'm trying to make it so I can move the mouse cursor further to the left without accidentally doing this and then and not realizing I'm doing that. Let's see, Banjo-Kazooie Nintendo 64 has been decompiled, opening the door to PC ports. I'm trying to unlock the door for somebody. I've noticed that my Wise smart lock, if somebody presses on the door or knocks on the door, gets jammed, which it'd be nice if it said, hey, somebody's pressing on your door, somebody's knocking on your door, instead, as a notification, instead of it just logging deep in the logs that the door is jammed. But also, That is the problem with doors in general, is that they expand and contract during the heat in the winter. And so door locks are pretty notorious for being bad. Back to video game news though. Yeah, I think we are going to fairly quickly, in fact I kind of expected it to be a little bit quicker, see Nintendo 64 games all become decompiled. I don't think too many of the games were programmed in that diverse of programming languages or engines, so that there is definitely a thought that once Ocarina of Time was decompiled, Majora's Mask was likely to also be decompiled. If Mario 64 was decompiled, I imagine a lot of other Nintendo games would be decompiled. It just certainly wasn't a time where anybody was expecting that individuals would have computers strong enough to decompile and break down code. So it's not like these games really have encryption on them or copy protection. It is very much just security through obscurity, in the sense that the end code is just the end code. And honestly, the only technology that I think exists right now that might have a chance of not being broken down and decompiled in the next 30 years would be more of the TPM trusted platform module style of computers there, where entire games, as far as consoles would go, would have individual encryption keys that are calling back to a server to verify themselves, and every single piece of the hardware in something like a Switch, I'm not even sure this is true for a Switch, is encrypted and connected to each other through a handshake encryption key, preventing sniffing between one component, one chip on a device and the next device. iPhones do that, which makes them incredibly more difficult to fix and replace parts on. Now, it is still very much a case that most people are not going to go out there and download the program to decompile Banjo-Kazooie, because this still is a case where you're going to need a Nintendo 64 ROM, a Banjo-Kazooie, then the software is going to take all the assets from that ROM, and character modules, audio and text, and then compile it into a whole new code, which could be tweaked and changed to give you a native PC, whether that's Windows or Linux. You could theoretically also make a Mac OS or even Android version of it. They'll give you a native PC, a native application for whatever you compile it, whatever platform you compile it for. Giving you something like this. Here's Ocarina of Time that has been tweaked in its code to handle an extremely wide resolution on a curved monitor, to the point where I'm not sure this actually looks good. It's kind of hard to tell without sitting right in front of it whether that's really what you would want or not. Although inherently this is the kind of thing that would fix the problems with fix some of the problems with the VR also, is if you could decompile programs and make them much wider, that would work. Once again, we have a screenshot here. I thought I had fixed it, but maybe I had only fixed it for the examples I'd fixed it for. There is also a danger of just diminishing enthusiasm if the Ocarina of Time games, if Mario 64, if Banjo-Kazooie, I'm not sure Mario 64 has been decompiled, but if all those games get decompiled, it's just going to require an extra amount of enthusiasm to try and decompile the Barbie games for Nintendo 64, which I'm sure there was at least one of them, or any lesser known, lesser liked Nintendo 64 game. And certainly there's a lot of Nintendo 64 games out there that aren't that interesting, aren't that long, so it may not really be worth it to get to a point where we have 100% decompilation for every Nintendo 64 game that's ever been made. Meanwhile, it's also possible that we'll just find better ways to emulate the Nintendo 64 hardware to the point where it's not really necessary to decompile a lot of these games, particularly since Zelda and Banjo-Kazooie are highly unlikely to have legitimate PC ports ever available on Steam, where this decompilation project would actually help with that quite a bit, but Nintendo's just not going to do that. If anything, Nintendo likely has the source code for some of their older games and could just make PC ports fairly easier than trying to decompile it in the first place. Let's see. Moving on, the Visions of Mana studio is set to close as NetEase and Tencent reportedly scale back their Japanese investments. It's claimed that Chinese companies are reconsidering their efforts in Japan. There is a margin issue certainly here that needs to be addressed. Like, there clearly is enough room for Japan to have been on this line. Tencent really wouldn't have fit on that line. That would have then moved that up. I imagine I will just be tweaking things left and right while we try to adjust all this. Yeah, it's almost like you could have made this claim, this assumption 5 years ago, 10 years ago, really. You could have made it probably 20 or 30 years ago. Any Chinese company, NetEase and Tencent in this case, is not going to be consistent in a desire to work with the Japanese or try and sell in Japan more than anywhere else. There's just too much of a culture clash there, and too much politics, and too much of a history there of most Asian countries being mad at Japan for things that they are doing either now or then. Sea of Japan, Sea of China conflicts still flaring up fairly consistently, hints that Japan and China may go to more hostile standings between each other. And China in particular, the Chinese government has always been assumed that they are using economic warfare against everybody they can possibly affect, whether that is subsidizing electronical vehicles to the point where they're probably losing a lot of money, even though they also are not following any kind of guidelines as far as labor laws or environmental laws. But yeah, they are flooding Europe and the United States and North America with electronic vehicles, and they're doing that exclusively to just become a monopoly. Now, in fairness, let's point out that Uber has been allowed to do that in the United States, flooding cheap rides while not really following labor laws that they should be following, just to become a monopoly. Amazon.com has totally been doing that. Google, Microsoft, all guilty of doing that. So the United States has let their own native companies do that in many cases too, and is definitely not blameless. And I think most countries have been probably far too lenient on their own homegrown companies. But yeah, China is a massive country and they do it on a massive scale. And it's always been assumed that the likes of NetEase and Tencent would be inconsistent as investors. And that's why there's always been a trepidation between seeing small and medium tier companies either being acquired in part by Tencent or invested in by Tencent. And it's not China either. The Saudi Arabia Public Interest Fund is another political focused investment group to keep an eye on. Meanwhile, as gamers, if you're a fan of Visions of Mana, you just want more Visions of Mana. You don't want to have to dive deep into understanding the politics of the situation. It really gets into that distasteful statement that everything is politics, which is possibly true, but not what any gamer wants to hear. Moving on, Annapurna is co-financing Control 2, will bring Remedy IP including Alan Wake to film and TV. Remedy says the deal will make Control 2 exactly the game we want it to be. This is an interesting financing deal that we really haven't seen in the game industries before, as far as a TV and film company has apparently some money to burn and is giving it over to Remedy, while not, I think, really gaining any of the rights to the IP either. So it's kind of a weird publishing deal in which they may be getting film and TV rights for Remedy games like Control and Alan Wake, but they aren't getting any kind of recoup fee, it sounds like. Maybe I'm wrong about that, as effectively being a partial publisher of Control 2. On the face of it, though, it is probably a good thing for Control 2, because my main complaints about Control 1 was that there was just not a lot of variety there, not a lot of polish on the upgrades. The enemies are all exactly the same, and the good story parts are intriguing, but the level design was kind of rough, and overall I think the story is a little simplistic. So if they can take that money and do more of the good stuff and less of the repetitive, boring stuff. In a lot of ways, Control felt like it was a tech demo for ray tracing and flying around and throwing objects through the air with telekinesis. I would like to see it be a little bit more grounded in its sequel and a little bit more interesting as far as having actual puzzles and having more of a mystery or stories to focus on. Yep. Inherently, there were several SCPs in Control that were kind of interesting, but then they were very much just side things that you can miss. Notoriously, when I played Control, I missed the entire basement section, and having seen other people play the basement section, I really have no interest in going back and seeing that section either. Let's see. Nintendo ends the repair support for the new Nintendo 3DS. So now the 2DS and 2DS XL are the only systems from the 3DS generation that Nintendo will still repair. So that ends the 3DS screen, which we have really no good way of emulating the 3DS effect on the screen. I don't think any game really got made where it mattered. Even Nintendo fairly quickly moved everything to 2DSs anyways. But yeah, and that's a confusing numbering sequence. Anyways, is that the 3DS came out, then the 2DSs came out. But yeah, those games are going to probably just be flattened if they're ever emulated on anything. Theoretically, you should be able to do some kind of LiDAR or camera focus to tilt shift the image, but I don't think any emulator supports a webcam to potentially do that, and you just have to have almost perfect screen and perfect distance of the person's head from the screen for the 3DS effect to really work. It's probably easier just to build it in such a way that it would work on VR goggles instead, and still the effect is going to be minimal. Nintendo, I suppose, is moving ahead as far as repairing less and less for whatever the next Nintendo console is. Although, wouldn't it be ironic if there was no new Nintendo console and this is just Nintendo closing up shop? Yeah, if it were a case that Nintendo actually was lying about how much money they had and that they don't have 100 years worth of annual budget sitting around, the only way they could really save face there is to say we're just going to shut down and shut the whole company down for an abrupt no explanation given reason, and that's pretty crazy. I don't think that would actually happen, but I could see Nintendo becoming very minimal on what they do. They could say we don't want to make another console, we're just going to make PlayStation games, or we're just going to make PC games. That would be quite the shift for them to do it that abruptly, but we do have a new guy in charge of Nintendo, so things could change. But I think it's mostly that they are just not wanting to repair consoles like the 3DS that are still super popular in Japan, and they're trying to force the Japanese audience in particular, who are getting less and less happy with Nintendo, to be more flash consumers that will just consume products and then throw them away and consume the next products over and over again. Let's see. Konami acknowledges that Metal Gear Solid 4 is still only playable on the PS3. I guess references to the game were found in files of the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection. Which, okay. I didn't realize that was the case, and that does certainly point out a problem there. If you wanted to play the Metal Gear Solid series as far as the old games, although you're in kind of a rough position right now that you would want to play the old series, since they're making remakes, or they're pretending like they're making remakes. Take your pick on what you believe there. Shinji Mikami doesn't think there's a lot of space for a new Dino Crisis while Monster Hunter is so popular. In fairness, if that would be the same team, it does make a lot of sense. Yeah. So, but Dino Crisis is a fairly different game. Although, a remake or reboot of Dino Crisis would have to be a fairly smaller, fairly different game from what the old Dino Crises were. Jeez. I don't know what I did here, that I messed with the CSS so much that it's wrong on almost every page here, when I thought I had fixed that. But clearly I didn't. Yeah. It is very possible I'll tweak it for one page and it will just undo the changes for the other, because I'm trying to find the exact character CSS label, style class label, and if I get the wrong one, it'll affect other things. I'm very much doing surgery here with a chainsaw, much more than I'm doing it with a delicate scalpel. I'm trying to slowly learn how to do smaller incisions. Like a Dragon director says, studio fights are welcome because they make games better. If there are no arguments, you can expect no more than a lukewarm final product. Yeah, that is certainly a thought to keep in mind, is that there should be professional and respectful disagreements in any creative, collaborative creative enterprise. Even if in the case of being an individual artist, say a painter painting a painting, there probably should be some criticism and arguments between different painters to just create a breeding ground for new ideas. Even though a lot of that stuff is going to be subjective or just highly opinionated. But yeah, that does certainly point out that in many environments there has been pushes from many different reasons. Sometimes it's because it's a bunch of SJWs that are triggered when they hear even clapping, trying to prevent any kind of conflict or argument. Sometimes it's from more censorious right-wing people too, trying to prevent any dissidence or conflict. There is unfortunately a harder time to always push for free and open discussion and free and open discourse, particularly in businesses where they just want to avoid conflict all over the place. And you certainly see that best represented and echoed as far as criticism goes in the game industry. If somebody says a character's design, a female character's design in particular, the Horizon Zero Dawn character exactly looks worse than what the players were anticipating or what the players wanted, that discussion, instead of being taken as something that might be a legitimate criticism, is immediately dismissed as just being sexist, or and then immediately it falls into mudslinging, where you're calling the Horizon Zero Dawn people woke, and maybe there's some truth to all of that, but certainly there are people on both sides that probably are sexist and woke, but the actual argument is not being addressed at that point. And I think the argument in that case in particular should have been addressed, in that there were legitimately people who did not like the character being changed, period, whether for better or worse. They just didn't like that the appearance of the character changed dramatically from the first game to the second game. And that is reasonable to complain about, is that you like the first game, you want the same character in the second game, or you want a good explanation and a good reason for the character to look different. Inherently, it is also amazing that a Japanese person is making this argument, because under Japanese society, you generally are always trained to go with the flow. Maybe the newer generations of people who are now coming into power no longer believe in the just put up with it, just go with the flow, just agree with the boss mentality, particularly under creative enterprises. But yeah, it is really surprising that a Japanese person would say that there should be arguments. And I imagine most Japanese workers are going to argue very subtly and not in big, loud shouting matches like you might have in other countries. One of the worst kept secrets recently, the PS5 Pro has been announced, and announcement plans and console designs have leaked. I guess it hasn't actually been announced yet. Which, yeah. Not seeing anything major here. Maybe there's wider ventilation slots on the PS5 Pro, but they aren't trying to do anything majorly different here. I hope the next PlayStation doesn't have such a ridiculous design, but wouldn't be surprised if it does. I'm still very confused. From day one, I was confused as to why the PlayStation 5 is in white when white is the color of death in Japanese myth, and where black is the color of death more in Western myths. Although in fairness, it's just not the case that the rest of the world is as superstitious as the Japanese used to be, at least. Apparently they're not that superstitious anymore. But yeah, this whole design is just kind of ridiculous. And if that, I mean, weirdly, the design of the PS5 may be the thing that historians say about the PS5. Is that there's nothing else interesting in it as far as hardware that would be worth reporting on, and there's not really that many games worth mentioning. So yeah, right now, if I was going to say the history of the PS5, I would say it has a ridiculous white design, and Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 sold really good on the PS5. And that's kind of it. Every other game is probably going to be multi-platform and not really that much of an exclusive. The shocking thing you could say about the PS5 is just how successful it's actually been, considering it hasn't had any exclusives, and how well it's sold in the West, despite still being a distant second place compared to the Nintendo Switch in Japan. Apparently Verdansk is coming back to Call of Duty Warzone, which is apparently a map, which I guess that's news for fans of Call of Duty Warzone. Bungie has reportedly fired a former Marathon director after a misconduct allegations by a female staffer. The veteran director was replaced in the mid-2023, so I guess this is possibly a follow-up from an old story. Do we have the actual name? Let's see. Joe Ziegler is the new guy that took over Marathon. Amidst reports that the former director, Christopher Barrett, had left the company. Interesting. This is a potential point where you can have a retrospective if you have been playing Marathon. I'm not sure Marathon is even out yet, though. So, yeah. I don't think Marathon is even out yet. So, we'll never know, really. We'll never really know. Yeah. This is the kind of headline and story that I find most frustrating because, A, I'd want to see people have their day in court effectively, and instead of it just being all hidden behind a company where, if this information is important for society to know about, which arguably it probably should be highlighted more, but I mean, there's just a whole wide range of ways you could interpret such a small amount of information, and you'll just never know if any of it's true. Many people will have a knee-jerk reaction saying that it was the director who was at fault. Many people will have a knee-jerk reaction that will say it's the female staff that were at fault, or that they were just making up allegations, weaponizing Me Too and things like that. And at best, the only thing I guess I could really say is that there, for one reason or another, is either there is a significant lack of female staff in game development overall. And a major part of that, I have heard from individual people reporting, is that in elementary school, junior high, middle school, college, female staff are not treated fairly and looked down upon. Female programmers and engineers not treated fairly. There might also very well be a biological component to that programming has just been developed from the ground up by men, for men, and the way men think, where there had more women been inventing the programming languages, they might work a lot better. And societally, in the West at least, in the United States at least, there are better paying jobs, better conditions for other jobs than game programming anyways, which definitely is leading to a shortfall of female programmers. So yeah, those are things I can say that I'm pretty sure are true. Unfortunately for this headline, I don't know what's true. I don't think we ever will know, and so then this inherently is just rumor milling. Meanwhile, it really doesn't have anything to do with the game at all. So, as a gamer, we really can't do anything. Like, we shouldn't pick sides because we don't have the evidence, so we really shouldn't even hear it. That very much was the case in the old days, is when somebody tried to tell you a rumor or spread rumors effectively, people were a lot wiser to that and say, I don't want to hear this. This is none of my business. I'm not going to pass on these rumors. I'm not going to listen to these rumors. Unfortunately, I'd say, particularly for the game industry, rumor milling has just become standard as much as news reporting. And I would say that kind of headline is not news until it leads to an actual court case, which doesn't seem to be the case here. It doesn't seem like the director is suing because he was wrongfully terminated or wrongfully demoted. It doesn't seem like the female staff are suing for being harassed. So, yeah. If nobody has brought it to the court case, then it just shouldn't be talked about. Moving on, The Witcher 4 is set to enter production soon, CD Projekt says. I still assume that their name is CD Projekt Red, but seems like they may have finally just changed it to CD Projekt. I really hope that the next Witcher game is a little smaller in its square footage. That whole middle section of the islands in the ocean was really unnecessary. And yeah, overall, even without the island sections, I feel like you could do a 10 or 20% reduction in the square footage of the maps so that players can just have more of a more dense experience of going from point A to point B. I also would say that somewhere between a 5 to 10% just pathing improvement could help too. It felt like there were definitely some points where you could have missed interesting side quests or missed main story quests even if you didn't go to the right place. Yeah, who knows what the actual story or what Witcher you're even going to be playing as. It wouldn't be this would be the time certainly to get rid of Geralt of Rivia and introduce a new guy. Someone who hopefully is more likable from the start and not as gruff, perhaps. I assume it's a guy. It might be a girl. It might be Ciri. And then, yeah, this is old news that Gotoku Studio is hosting a presentation next month. And then that's going to bring us into the Gematsu headlines, which I'm still running my old macros. I didn't work on that. I'm having trouble getting back to working on that since it's a little bit more complicated. So made some tweaks on the Gematsus just to change these bars from being red to white, trying to keep everything into the same theme. Made some tweaks just to try and line up everything here. Yeah, here's the Legend of Zelda trailer we already looked at. Kodansha Game Creators Lab announces its Tokyo Game Show 2024 lineup with 16 of 25 titles being revealed. Some of these look like they might be something, while some of these look like they might be smaller games. Yeah. They may all be slightly smaller games. Some of them are iOS and Android releases too. And everything here is going to be slow, isn't it? So if I see any Steam listings here that aren't on the fault list or wish list, I'm going to keep them, but if they are on fault list or wish list, I'm going to close the tab. Super Dark Deception is coming to the PS4 and 5, Xbox One Series and Switch on August 30th. Part of the problem here is the gestures I have are not great. Wizard 101. This is a very old game. It must have something new about it. See, like, ideally, I'd want to be able to jump to the page on the far right. But, and I can't even bring up the settings. That's something else I'd have to work on. Eternites. Honkai Star Rail version 2.5 update, Flying Aureus shot to Lupin Rue, launches September 10th. I did tweak these galleries on Gematsu, changing the color and everything like that. Now, one of the things that's still a problem is when I click show me a big picture, I haven't figured out a way to put the big picture wherever my mouse cursor is. So I can tell it to be in the center, I can tell it to be at the top, but I think there probably is a way to tell it to do that. But yeah, I removed the red background on these, the red background on this, the red color on this. So it's all very black and white with a shade of gray. Of course, you still get into these thumbnails and you still get into the branding of YouTube, and there's bits of red. So red probably should play a role in the themes overall, although I don't prefer it. I think the blue, black with white text with a black shadow works very nicely. In fact, I'm approaching a point here where it definitely feels nicer to look at these in this theme than it does in their original theme as far as news stories go. A big part of that also is adjusting the font size, which that may also be what needs to happen here. Instead of adjusting the margin, let's just make the font size bigger. Shinkosen to Isho launches September 5th in Japan. It's apparently a fully voiced adventure game. I'm going to keep this tab to work on it more. I'm dragging these tabs down to the bottom screen, but you can't see that because when I go to the bottom monitor, it just shows you Yu-Gi-Oh! Memory's off. So not always true. It has a PS5 version and has been delayed to early 2025. Seems like we're maybe getting back to a more standard case of Japanese games often being delayed. I intentionally am trying to keep an empty space margin here, so when we do get to these screenshots, I could potentially try and tweak this a little bit bigger, but this works pretty well, I would say. In that case, that worked, although in this case it's really too big. I haven't really tried to scale these images down. And in fairness, if I'm going to click on a picture, I probably don't want it scaled down. Bloomberg says NetEase Games plans to close Visions of Mana developer Ouka Studios. Few remaining staff to reportedly oversee final rollout of games. Which that's a slightly different headline for the same news story. The Forever Winter launches in early access on September 24th. Don't think I've seen this game before. And clearly, if I am trying to have margins at the bottom, it's not really working here in this case. And then this likes to have thick white line banners, which is a little bit distracting. But I have gotten everything stretched out fairly close to what I want, or scaled fairly close to what I want. Again, there might be some room for tweaking here and making the picture a little bit bigger. I'm not using exactly the right programming, obviously. I'm not using the right phrases to fully explain to the web pages what I want. Otherwise, it would be calculating the exact right width to stretch to and the exact right height to be at. And often I think I may need to just find the right percentages to figure that out and just tweak it slowly. This could be a month to years long process to just lock down the CSS code so it always looks the way I want it to look. It would be easier if I was using a program. It would be easier if I had the source code. Well, we basically do have the source code. It'd be easier if I started from scratch, though. That would be easier. Let's see, Bloodless is coming to the Switch in 2024, and the PC version is out today. At least on the Gamatsu, though, we're not seeing any major problems as far as the layout. Which way was Steam going with demos? I feel like they were doing something with demos where it was either demos were going to have their own page or demos were going to be integrated into the main page. I think they were going to be integrated into the main page to try and save some confusion on the Steam page. The whole prologues issue that Steam encouraged themselves is still going to be an issue, though. Doomsday Paradise is coming to the Switch on September 12th. That's why that page was open. I got yet another comment on Steam. No, on YouTube, as far as my YouTube shorts, asking if it's free, which, yeah, I guess that's just going to be an occasional thing, is somebody's going to ask if it's free. And I kind of get it. People are broke, and there is just a style of person out there that is going to either assume everything is free or at least roll the dice and ask if everything is free. There's probably room on the YouTube shorts to say something like check Steam for price. in your local area or something like that. I'd have to make it shorter and more piffy than that. Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown Year 1 roadmap has been announced. Because my macro is automatically opening every single tab, it is certainly creating a situation where some tabs are getting open that I would have not chosen to really open. Let's see. Super Dark Deception here. Unfortunately, not being received well enough to be relevant. Yeah. We have by far seen more games have mixed or negative reviews move over to the Switch and announce Switch versions than we have seen great games that have real enthusiasm behind them move over to the Switch. It definitely feels like Switch is increasingly becoming the dumping ground of games that didn't sell on PC. Let's see, the Disney Pixel RPG debut trailer is here. I remember when this was announced, it definitely looked different. I'm still not sure that there's a game here I would want to play. So is this trailer going to load? And it is slowly buffering, but it should just be playing at this point. Let's see if the Japanese one wants to play instead. So you give yourself an advantage by having pixely characters. You're not Kingdom Heartsing the game too much. Wouldn't be surprised if this isn't something that fits very nicely on mobile, which seems like what they're targeting. I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't something that is just more of a, what is that Mega Man game I'm thinking of, Battle Arena. I want to see the actual combat. Doesn't seem like it's really showing much of that. Yeah. It does feel like you're just lane placement of a bunch of Battle Arena. Now, weirdly, this is also the, like, multiple time here where Disney has struggled to figure out how to make a new enemy for Mickey. Mickey himself not really having much of an identity. They have like Maleficent on the good guy's side, and so they're leaning on an infected version of some of the older Disney bad guy characters, or the older Disney characters in general. This might be a game I would try, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's horribly microtransaction based and is actually really a poor experience for free to play, or if there is any free to play possibility. But if it is just going to be an Android game, I might try it out and see how it goes. It might very well also be a very slow game in that you may have only so many levels at launch, and you may have a mana system that slows you down, and it may be a very repetitive game too. Now, I would want to make a kind of facetious comparison here to something like Memento Mori, which, I've talked about Memento Mori, but I've never really shown it. So let's actually show just off the visuals here of Memento Mori. I mean, is that not the name of it? Is it Memento Morte? No, it's Memento Mori. So yeah, this style, not super consistent as far as game development goes. This chalk brown sepia tone style, it's just very much more what you're expecting from mobile games, is that level of quality, if not that specific art style. So the 8-bit pixely Mickey Mouse style just does feel very, very different. Of course, the games I tend to play also are anime waifu style kawaii characters, and Mickey Mouse pixely is not that either. This is a game that's 2 or 3 years old at this point, and it has very much a lot of stuff you can do, and I just don't think you really, from what I've seen so far of the Mickey Mouse game, that there's going to be anything like that. I think they're probably going to be targeting younger kids. What's funny about Memento Mori is it is an auto battler too, so you don't control any of these characters on your team. They just automatically go take their turns and attack the enemy teams, and that's it. You can actually just speed up the whole process with this button and skip the whole process. But while I did say this is a facetious comparison, and there's a little bit of lewdness in Memento Mori, but nowhere that much, really. You'll have some costumes that show some side boob, and that's about it. You'll never see a nipple or anything like that. It's definitely not Tinka Fuma, which is full-on nudity and hardcore pornography in the game. But yeah, I said this was a facetious comparison to the Mickey Mouse game, but it really isn't, because Memento Mori is selling itself based on each one of these characters having a thematic musical song that plays and that they sing whenever you interact with them. And these songs are good enough that they're actually selling them as collections on CDs, and that's what the game is sold by. Well, Mickey Mouse, Disney, was very much heavily around music in the original Disney movies, in the era in which Mickey Mouse would have become very big. So it isn't super crazy that a free-to-play mobile RPG might have some really good music that would bring back the nostalgia around Mickey Mouse. But yeah, I don't see anything here that says that would be the case. I wonder if Disney actually makes any money selling soundtracks or songs from their old Disney movies. I don't think they make enough money doing much of anything with their old content. Which, by the way, I've seen more evidence now that I think confirms Cartoon Network has been completely shut down. The Cartoon Network website has been shut down. It seems like everything is being pushed towards Max. I don't know if the Cartoon Network channel on cable is going anywhere, but it very possibly might be. Yeah, that certainly would be a big one to lose. Here you have almost direct competition to the Mickey Mouse game. A free-to-play Magic School MMORPG, Wizard 101, is coming to PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. Which, yeah, this is also a level more, I would expect, even for cell phone games, is to just have higher levels of animation, 3D modeling. Yeah, there definitely seems like there's just a level, a higher level of complexity here. This game has been out for a very long time on PC though, so not a lot of players still playing it. And if anything, I would have thought Wizarding 101 may have been one of those mobile games that you always see commercials for, just by the name. Return Nights is coming to the Switch on October 17th, which that's from 2023. And I'm trying to make fewer YouTube shorts here that are just promoting games that are going to other consoles. I looked at this trailer. I think that means all of these are probably duplicate tabs. I don't know why this goes in cycles like this. And the biggest concern here is it's going in a loop in a recursive manner. So if there are 5 links, it may be opening up all 5 of those links 5 times, whereas if there are 6 links, it might be opening all those links 6 times. I hate to do this, but I think we're going to also end today without looking at any of the new games on Steam either. Or we may just have this situation where I end up going back and showing the games from Wednesday today, and then I'll show the curated picks for games that came out this Friday on Monday, and then we probably would catch up on Monday. That's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com, which for a second there I thought I'd really screwed up this page if the image is not loading, but nope. Yep, and GameDeveloper.com seems like it's mostly alright, although there's an indent here when there's not an indent in other places. So that's nitpicky, but it's something I would like to keep consistent. Atari's CEO wants Infogrames to become the ultimate preservationist publisher. There's not really a strong moat around this space, so competition can increase rapidly and decrease rapidly. The ones that survive will have a strong brand. Well, at least that's a plan. I don't know if it's a good plan or not. I'm not even going to bother to think about it. But yeah, the new Atari saying, hey, let's take this brand that's somewhat known and make it a preservationist publisher. Does that inherently mean that they're going to publish games that weren't originally made by Infogrames? I'm not sure if that's what they're thinking or not. There is already a couple of companies, though, that have made way as being preservationist publishers, if we're going to make that a term, that they would have to compete against, and hopefully a little competition might improve or increase the number of games that are preserved and re-released, or improve how they're re-released, because there's definitely one company that just kind of releases games on an emulator and does a low effort, and then there's definitely one company that seems to do a really good job about it. Let's see. Here's what I assume is an opinion piece called Patch Notes Number 2. How does the game industry survive beyond 2025? I don't think the game industry is just going to collapse. The bubble may burst. A lot of companies may go out of business. It may become a much smaller industry. But I just don't believe video games will stop being a thing. Books have not stopped being a thing. Music hasn't stopped being a thing. Music and books are far less popular than they once were, but there will always be video games, unless we lose technology over completely or replace it with something with a new phrase that's like a video game but better. Let's see. Rogue Snail decouples its free-to-play mechanics from Realm Hunter's Legend after its Gearbox split. The studio is making the early access game into a premium title when it hits 1.0. That might be for the better, that might be for the worse. I'll be interested in seeing how that is really received. Excuse me. My biggest problem here is the fact that you can just have a game be in early access and experiment and then change everything when you quote unquote release it for real. But yeah, I guess in general, don't buy early access games is still my suggestion. I got my new much bigger beer stein plastic mugs, which is, I think it holds 32 ounces of water now, so no longer am I having to have 5, 6, 8 ounce mugs next to me on my side table during these streams. It's much more manageable, and that I'm drinking 2 32 ounces of water at most, which is a lot of water, but you should drink as much water as you feel thirsty, unless there's something physically wrong with you. And the whole 8 glasses of water a day is actually a misnomer, and it's not based on real science. And particularly if you're talking a lot, you need a lot of water. The glasses are comedically large, certainly. And yeah, if you went much bigger, they wouldn't fit on a shelf, and there would be so much water in it, it would be difficult to lift it, even for a fairly strong person to lift. Even being made out of plastic, which makes them pretty lightweight. We already talked about 3DS repair ending support. GameDeveloper.com says it's because they drained the part supply, which, yeah, I can see that. I can see there being no more warehouses full of 3DS parts in China or Japan left. Notice they didn't ever really make an adapter where you could plug in a 2DS, 3DS cartridge or Game Boy cartridge or anything to play it on like a Switch. So I imagine you'll see some people have made those kinds of adapters, but that's it. That's likely going to be the only way you could play in a 3DS game, is by probably downloading the ROM. Here's the same stories we've already covered as far as Annapurna and financing Control 2. Yeah, I kind of feel like you almost have to play as some completely different character in Control 2, or you have to, I mean, it is a sci-fi mystery story, so it wouldn't be the craziest thing if she walked through some kind of mirror and just ended up in an alternate universe where she's maybe a member of Control but not the director of Control. She doesn't have such a powerful gun, she just has a regular gun. Otherwise you have to expand the world, which that's not a terrible idea either, where she could be the director of Control, but there could be several other Control-like organizations out there, or just on a multi-universal scale, Control is just a small fry in a big, small fish in a big pond type thought. If she ended up in an entirely different world outside of the office, that might work fairly well too. I'd like to see Control go into multiple locations and have a lot more variety. Roblox is going to let creators / people they exploit list item bundles to grow their earnings. Which, yeah, Roblox increasingly becoming more of a store and less of a game or game creation platform. Mental health in games charity Take This is facing extinction. The nonprofit will be forced to shut down if it can't raise $80,000 by the end of September. I've never heard of Take This before. Yeah. Yeah, so no surprise that they're facing extinction. Inherently, you need kind of a lot of consistent donators or some really rich people who back a foundation, a charity. You need enough money to advertise yourself, to keep yourself relevant, which really makes a great argument where charities aren't financially very efficient in that they have to maintain themselves or they'll just go out of business. I have no idea what Take This really does, though. It's dedicated to decreasing stigma and increasing support for mental health in games, which sounds like a good goal, but maybe not really a goal you really need. Like, I don't see a lot of stigma as far as people with mental health problems playing games. If anything, I think it's pretty common that people with mental health issues play video games as much as people without mental health issues play video games. What you mean by mental health in games can be a wide range of things. Is this people with depression playing video games, or is this saying that people who yell and scream on Call of Duty at each other are mentally unhealthy? Because yeah, you could certainly see them going down that path too and saying, well, the hostility in Call of Duty is the problem, and that's what we're focusing on. But yeah, you definitely start to see charities which start to run out of funding when times are bad, when bubbles burst. And so it's no surprise we'll probably see more of this, and it probably won't really affect much. Anyways, generally, if I had mental health problems, I wouldn't want to go to something video game related for that. I would just want to go to a regular psychiatrist and just get that regular treatment like everybody else. Now, there is a secondary argument to be made there that you might find a psychiatrist that decides to just blame video games for all your problems, and there are definitely, quote, family therapists, I believe is what they're called in the United States, that are not qualified in any way and often are religion based, and they will blame they will blame your mental conditions on all kinds of things, perhaps being gay, perhaps being transgender, perhaps playing video games, perhaps looking at porn, and then you all of a sudden have a sex addiction. But yeah, there's definitely a case to be made that you don't need a level of specialization around games if you have mental health problems. If anything, I think a lot of people lives are improved who have mental health problems by playing games. And I don't think there's much in games that's really hurting people's mental health. There are, of course, people who are always obsessive and play too much of video games, but that's about it. Exact same article twice in a row. Well, you sort of talked about this article, for what little details it seems like they really have. Apparently, Cyberpunk and Phantom Liberty remain big drivers behind CD Projekt Red's revenue growth. These are probably older stories from GameDeveloper.com. Square Enix eyes bigger Xbox focus after pretty good Final Fantasy XIV response. Well, it might be the beginning of a game changer, certainly, if all of a sudden Final Fantasy games were getting released on the Xbox in Japan on day one. I don't think this page wants to load. Yeah, maybe that one doesn't want to load either. Yeah. Blockchain studio Double Jump Tokyo netted $10 million from SBI Investments, Sony, and others. And then the classic studio Argonaut Games revived as a boutique publisher. Yeah. Yeah, clearly I don't need these tabs to go to sleep because that's just making things worse. Let's just go through the rest of these and see if there's anything new or if this isn't just the same tabs. It's still such a mess. And it's my own fault, certainly. I didn't work on the 2.0 version of this macro to try and make sure this isn't a mess. So if I'm not changing anything, obviously the outcome is going to be the same. Yeah. You can see as these pages are waking up, they are reloading the custom CSS. Alright. So, very quickly, I will show off the games that I curated on Wednesday, and then I will curate the games that came out between Wednesday and this Friday, and I will show those off on Monday, probably with the same with the things that came out over the weekend. It is Labor Day weekend in the United States, though there isn't a huge chance of a lot of games coming out. Why is the JavaScript not working? It is now. It's just took forever. Yeah, everything wakes up. That means the screens and my extra JavaScript injection that makes the screenshots move faster. Inherently, if I am using that JavaScript injection, I should also probably speed up the speed of trailers. I guess the question is how far to go. Here, I'm going to end this stream in less than 2 hours. Do I think I can get it down to 1 hour and 30 minutes? Definitely not going to get it down to something like 10 minutes. This one is not in English, so that has to go. And certainly it is a different experience curating games off screen than it is on screen. I think there is more room for me to be more generous. Usually I'm lying on my bed, which puts my eyes at a slightly different angle, and yeah, so I might be a little bit more generous just on what I'm looking at. This one has like dark screenshot syndrome, so I'm going to say no to that. Games still come out, still have a chance of being good, but then there's just this very wide gap between something like the Castlevania Dominus collection, which has a high level of relevancy, and I can just go ahead and put this on the wish list even, and then whatever this next game is going to be, which just is completely different. Yeah, I don't know if any other style product is really like that. There are things like clothes and fashion that have a wide range in the cost of them, but there really isn't a wide range in the quality of clothes. There's cars that have a wide range of cost, but not that wide of a range of quality. And often the range of quality is hidden extremely well. So in a case like boots or shoes, a low quality boot looks very similar to a very high quality boot, and you won't know the difference until years later. Here we have like a mobile game of solitaire that normally I would say no, but I'm not sure that there's actually just a good non-gambling solitaire game that doesn't have microtransactions on it on Steam. I'm trying to think. Well, I would say PC parts might be the case of where you can get some really low quality mobile laptop chips and really low quality RAM and really low quality hard drives. So there probably is a high variety there, but that still is probably somewhat hidden in that it's not until people kind of are in the know as far as what the level of quality between a i3 versus an i9 Intel CPU is. Yeah, there's a lot of really low quality laptops that you just couldn't play even the most simplistic games on. Alright, and I believe with that is going to be everything I've got to show. So as always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.